The galactic pet exchange buzzed with activity as hundreds of alien species wandered through the massive floating station. Crystalline beings from Vortex Prime examined glowing fish that sang in harmonious frequencies. Multi-armed traders from the Nexus Collective haggled over creatures that could phase through solid matter. The air hummed with translator devices converting dozens of languages into comprehensible speech. In the furthest corner of the station, where the lighting grew dim and foot traffic dwindled to almost nothing, sat a creature that had been there for over 3 standard galactic years. The dragon-like being was roughly the size of a large Earth dog, with iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to midnight blue depending on the angle of light. Its wings were folded tightly against its body, and its long, serpentine neck curved downward in what appeared to be perpetual shame. Around its neck hung an ancient metal tag, covered in symbols so old that most translation devices couldn't even recognize the script. The few dealers who had bothered to examine it over the years had dismissed it as decorative nonsense from some primitive world that had long since been forgotten by the galactic community. The creature's large, intelligent eyes watched as potential adopters approached, only to turn away after a few moments of observation. It never made a sound, never moved to show off any special abilities, and certainly never demonstrated the kind of flashy powers that made other exotic pets so desirable. The dragon simply existed quietly and without complaint, in its small containment area. "Poor thing hasn't eaten properly in weeks," muttered Kelrix, one of the Zephyrian attendants whose job it was to maintain the less popular specimens. His blue skin rippled with concern as he refilled the dragon's water bowl. "The rejection is affecting its appetite. Soon the council will probably order its termination if no one claims it." The dragon's ears twitched at these words, but it made no other movement. It had heard similar conversations countless times before. Hope was a luxury it could no longer afford. Meanwhile, on the human transport ship New Horizons, 12-year-old Marcus Chen pressed his face against the observation window as the galactic pet exchange came into view. His parents had finally agreed to let him choose a companion animal during their diplomatic mission to the Outer Rim territories. His father, Ambassador Chen, believed that understanding alien life forms was crucial for successful interspecies relations, while his mother, a xenobiologist, was eager to observe her son's interactions with non-Earth creatures. "Remember, Marcus," his mother said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, "we're looking for a companion that will be happy with our family, not just something that looks interesting. The best relationships are built on mutual understanding and respect." Marcus nodded eagerly, his mind racing with possibilities. He had studied dozens of alien species in preparation for this moment, reading about their habits, dietary needs, and compatibility with human families. What he hadn't expected was the sheer overwhelming nature of the exchange itself. As they docked and made their way through the station's entrance, Marcus was bombarded with sights, sounds, and smells that his young mind struggled to process. Creatures with too many legs scuttled past carrying tiny jeweled lizards. A being made entirely of what appeared to be living crystal offered him a bird whose feathers changed color with its emotions. Another vendor tried to sell his family a pet that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, though Marcus couldn't quite understand how that would work in their small ship quarters. "Take your time, son," his father advised, noticing Marcus's overwhelmed expression. "The right companion will make itself known to you." They spent hours exploring the main areas of the exchange. Marcus saw amazing creatures that could manipulate gravity, others that could communicate through telepathy, and some that seemed to be made of pure energy contained in shifting, colorful forms. Yet something about all these flashy displays felt wrong to him. The creatures seemed more like living advertisements than potential friends. "Can we look in the quieter sections?" Marcus asked after they had toured the main exhibition halls twice. "Maybe there are animals there who need homes too, but just aren't as loud about it." His parents exchanged a proud look. Their son was already showing the kind of empathy and wisdom that would serve him well in diplomatic circles. As they wandered into the dimmer areas of the station, Marcus noticed how the noise levels dropped and the crowds thinned. Here the creatures seemed more subdued, some appearing almost resigned to their circumstances. His heart went out to a small fuzzy creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a butterfly. But when he approached its enclosure, it hid in the furthest corner and refused to come out. Then he saw the dragon. It sat alone in its area, looking so dejected that Marcus immediately felt a pang of sympathy. Unlike the other creatures they had seen, This one didn't try to attract attention or show off any abilities. It simply sat quietly, occasionally lifting its head to observe the rare visitors before returning to its melancholic posture. "What's wrong with that one?" Marcus asked Kelrix, who had noticed the family's interest. The Zephyrian attendant sighed, his skin shifting to a sadder shade of blue. "Nothing's wrong with it exactly. It's healthy and well-behaved. It's just shy, I suppose. Doesn't do anything exciting. Most people want pets that can perform tricks or have useful abilities. This one just sits there." Marcus knelt down near the enclosure's barrier, studying the dragon more closely. Its scales were beautiful, and there was something undeniably intelligent about its large, sad eyes. Around its neck, the ancient tag caught his attention. The symbols etched into the metal were unlike anything he had seen in his studies. "What does the tag say?" he asked. Kelrix's skin rippled with embarrassment. "We're not sure. It's written in some archaic script that predates most of our translation databases. Probably just decorative. Many primitive worlds used to put meaningless symbols on their animals for ceremonial purposes. But Marcus wasn't satisfied with that explanation. Something about the careful way the symbols were arranged suggested they were more than mere decoration. There was a pattern to them, a deliberate structure that spoke of genuine meaning rather than random markings. "Mom," he called softly, "could you come look at this?" Dr. Sarah Chen approached her son and the dragon's enclosure with scientific curiosity. As a xenobiologist, she had encountered countless alien scripts and symbols throughout her career, though she specialized more in biological systems than linguistic analysis. She knelt beside Marcus and examined the tag carefully. "These markings are definitely intentional," she murmured, pulling out her portable scanner. "The metal appears to be some kind of crystalline alloy that I've never seen before. It's not corroding despite its apparent age, which suggests advanced metallurgy." She ran several scans, frowning at the results. "Marcus, this is fascinating. The symbols seem to have been etched using some form of energy that actually altered the molecular structure of the metal itself." The dragon had been watching their examination with growing interest. For the first time in months, it lifted its head fully and moved closer to the barrier that separated them, its large eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made the boy feel as though the creature was trying to communicate something important. "I think it wants us to understand the tag," Marcus said quietly. "Look at how it's watching us." Ambassador Chen joined his family, his diplomatic training kicking in as he observed the situation. In many cultures, tags or markings on animals serve specific purposes beyond mere identification. They might indicate status, origin, or even special instructions for care. He studied the dragon thoughtfully. The fact that this creature has survived for 3 years in captivity suggests it's remarkably resilient. Perhaps the tag contains information about its needs or abilities. Kelrix had been listening to their conversation with growing nervousness. "I should mention that the council is planning to, well, if the dragon isn't adopted soon, they'll need to make room for more marketable specimens. The decision is supposed to be made in the next few days." This information sent a chill through Marcus. The thought of this gentle, intelligent creature being destroyed simply because no one understood its value horrified him. "We need to find someone who can read this script. There has to be a way." Dr. Chen was already working on her scanner, trying different linguistic analysis programs. The problem is that most translation software focuses on contemporary languages, or at least those that have been cataloged within the last few thousand years. If this script is truly ancient, it might predate our databases entirely. "What about the university archives?" Ambassador Chen suggested. "Dr. Vorthak from the Centauri Institute owes me a favor. He specializes in dead languages. That could take days," Marcus said urgently, looking at the dragon's hopeful expression. "What if we don't have that much time?" As if understanding the gravity of the situation, the dragon moved even closer to the barrier. It raised one delicate claw and gently tapped the tag 3 times, then looked directly at Marcus. The gesture was so deliberately communicative that even Kelrix stepped back in surprise. Did it just try to tell us something?" the Zephyrian attendant asked, his skin shifting to a confused purple color. Marcus had an idea. What if the translation isn't about language at all? What if it's about symbols or mathematics? Universal concepts that don't depend on specific linguistic structures? He pulled out his personal learning tablet, which contained educational programs about various forms of communication. including mathematical concepts that were considered universal among intelligent species. Mom, can you help me cross-reference these symbols with mathematical or scientific notation systems? Dr. Chen smiled proudly at her son's logical approach. Brilliant thinking, Marcus. She connected her scanner to his tablet, and they began comparing the symbols on the tag with various universal notation systems used throughout the galaxy. For nearly an hour, they worked methodically through different possibilities. The dragon watched their efforts with what could only be described as patience mixed with growing excitement. Occasionally, when they seemed to be heading in the right direction, it would tap the tag again as if encouraging them. Finally, Marcus made a connection. Mom, look at this. These three symbols here appear in the same sequence in both the ancient Terran mathematical system and the early Vulcan numerical notation. And this cluster resembles the harmonic frequency markers used by the crystalline beings from Andromedus. Dr. Chen ran the comparison through her analysis software. You're right. It's not a language in the traditional sense. It's a technical specification written in mathematical and scientific concepts that transcended individual cultures. Her excitement grew as more patterns emerged. Marcus, I think this tag is actually a technical manual. A manual for what? Ambassador Chen asked, joining them as their discovery attracted attention from other visitors and attendants. For the dragon itself, Dr. Chen breathed, her eyes wide with realization. Look at these sequences. They're describing biological processes, energy conversions, and what appears to be activation protocols. Kelrix leaned forward, his skin now shifting to an interested orange color. Activation protocols? What does that mean? Marcus was already working on the translation, his young mind making connections with startling speed. It's not just a pet. It's some kind of biotechnological construct. These symbols describe how to unlock its true capabilities. He looked up at the dragon, which was practically vibrating with anticipation now. You're not shy at all, are you? You're just sleeping, waiting for someone to read the manual. The dragon's response was immediate and unmistakable. It reared up on its hind legs, spread its wings wide for the first time since they had been watching, and emitted a sound that was part purr, part harmonic frequency that seemed to resonate through the metal floors of the station. Other creatures in the area responded to the sound, many of them becoming agitated or excited. Alarms began beeping on various monitoring devices throughout the section. What did you do? Kelrix asked, but his tone was more amazed than accusatory. Marcus was still working through the mathematical sequences on the tag, his tablet displaying translation after translation. I think I just figured out how to wake it up properly. But there's more here. A lot more. These symbols describe abilities that are... He paused, checking his calculations again. This can't be right. What does it say? His mother asked urgently. According to this, the dragon isn't just a pet or companion. It's a guardian. A protector designed by some ancient civilization to bond with and defend specific individuals or families. Marcus looked up at his parents, then back at the dragon, which was watching him with what could only be described as hope. And apparently once the bond is formed, it can't be broken. The dragon chooses its person, not the other way around. The implications of this discovery sent ripples of excitement through the growing crowd of onlookers. If the boys' translation was correct, they weren't looking at a simple pet exchange anymore. They were witnessing the awakening of a piece of lost alien technology. But Marcus only had eyes for the dragon, which had moved as close to the barrier as possible, and was regarding him with an intensity that made his heart race. I think it's trying to choose me. The growing commotion had attracted station security, and within minutes, Chief Administrator Zixathera arrived with a team of analysts and xenobiologists. The crystalline being's faceted surface reflected the ambient light as she processed the situation through rapid data streams that caused her form to flicker with different colors. Explain the nature of this disturbance, she demanded, her translated voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to maintaining order in a facility that housed thousands of exotic and potentially dangerous life forms. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, his diplomatic training evident in his calm demeanor. Chief Administrator, my son has made what appears to be a significant archaeological and linguistic discovery. The tag on this dragon contains technical specifications written in ancient universal mathematical notation. Impossible, Zixathera replied, her surface shifting to a skeptical amber color. That specimen has been examined by our best linguists and xenobiologists. The tag was determined to be decorative only. Dr. Chen held up her scanner, displaying the translation matrices that Marcus had developed. With respect, Chief Administrator, it appears your linguists were looking for traditional language patterns. My son approached it as a mathematical and scientific document, which revealed its true nature. Sixthera's form flickered more rapidly as she processed this information. She extended a crystalline appendage toward Dr. Chen's scanner, interfacing directly with the device to examine the data. The silence stretched for several moments as she analyzed Marcus's work. The mathematical correlations are accurate, she admitted finally, her surface shifting to a more neutral blue. If this translation is correct, this creature is not a simple biological entity. It appears to be an ancient biotechnological artifact of considerable sophistication. Marcus watched the dragon throughout this exchange, noting how it seemed to understand every word being spoken, despite the multiple translation systems in use. Its eyes never left his face, and he found himself feeling an increasingly strong connection to the creature, as if invisible threads were being woven between them. According to the tag, Marcus said, his voice stronger now despite the intimidating presence of the officials, the dragon is called a Nexus Guardian. It was created by a civilization called the Architects to serve as protectors and companions to individuals with specific genetic and psychological profiles. What kind of profiles? Chief Administrator Zixathera asked. Her interest clearly piqued. Marcus consulted his tablet again, working through more of the complex mathematical sequences, intelligence above a certain threshold, empathy levels that meet specific criteria, and something called harmonic resonance compatibility. But there's more. He paused, double-checking his translation. Once a Nexus Guardian bonds with someone, it develops abilities specifically tailored to that person's needs and circumstances. The dragon had been listening intently to every word, and as Marcus finished speaking, it moved to the very edge of its enclosure. Without warning, it began to emit a low harmonic frequency that seemed to resonate not just through the air, but through the very structure of the station itself. Emergency alerts began sounding throughout the facility as sensitive equipment detected energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Other creatures in the area responded to the harmonic frequency, some becoming more active, others falling into what appeared to be peaceful trances. "Shut it down," Zixathera commanded, but before anyone could act, the dragon's song changed, becoming more complex and layered. The energy readings on the station's monitoring systems spiked impossibly high, then suddenly stabilized at levels that defied conventional understanding. Marcus felt the harmony washing over him, and something remarkable happened. He could suddenly understand, on a level that transcended language, exactly what the dragon was trying to communicate. It wasn't just singing. It was sharing its thoughts, its memories, and its profound loneliness directly with his mind. Images flashed through Marcus's consciousness, vast cities floating among the stars, beings of incredible wisdom and power working together to protect the innocent, and guardians like this dragon serving as bridges between different forms of life. He saw the fall of the Architect civilization, the scattering of their guardian creatures across the galaxy, and the centuries of waiting for someone who could understand their true purpose. "I can hear it," Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face from the overwhelming beauty and sadness of the dragon's memories. It's been waiting so long for someone to read the tag. It's been alone for over 300 years. The harmonic frequency continued to build, and other station personnel began arriving as the energy readings spread throughout the facility. Dr. Chen watched her son with a mixture of pride and concern, recognizing that something profound was happening that none of them fully understood. "Marcus," she said gently, "what is it telling you?" "Its name," Marcus replied, his voice filled with wonder. "Its name is Ethon, and it was created to protect those who seek to build bridges between different peoples, different species. The Architects made the Guardians to help prevent the kind of conflicts and misunderstandings that destroyed their own civilization." Ambassador Chen's eyes widened as the implications hit him. A guardian for diplomats and peacekeepers. Ethon's song reached a crescendo, and suddenly the barrier of the enclosure began to dissolve. Not through any mechanical failure, but as if the very atoms that composed it were being gently rearranged. Gasps and shouts erupted from the crowd as the dragon stepped free for the first time in 3 years. "Security alert! Containment breach!" someone shouted, but Ethan made no aggressive moves. Instead, it walked calmly through the dissolving barrier and approached Marcus. moving with a grace that spoke of intelligence and purpose. Chief Administrator Zix Thara raised her appendages to signal her security team to stand down. Despite the unprecedented nature of the situation, it was clear that the dragon posed no immediate threat. If anything, the various monitoring systems throughout the station were showing improved stability rather than danger. Ethon stopped directly in front of Marcus and lowered its head, presenting the ancient tag at eye level. The boy reached out instinctively, his fingers hovering just above the mysterious metal. If you touch it, he realized aloud. If I accept the bond, there's no going back. Hathan and I will be connected for the rest of our lives. Dr. Chen knelt beside her son. Marcus, this is an enormous decision. We don't fully understand what this bond means or what responsibilities it might bring. But we understand enough, Ambassador Chen said quietly, watching the interaction between his son and the dragon. We understand that this creature has been waiting centuries for someone who could read its purpose and accept its friendship. And we understand that Marcus has the chance to form a connection with a being that was specifically designed to help build peace between different peoples. Marcus looked into Ethan's ancient, intelligent eyes and saw not just a pet or companion, but a partner in the truest sense, someone who would understand his dreams of helping different species work together, someone who had been created for that very purpose. I want to try, Marcus said simply, and reached out to touch the tag. The moment his fingers made contact with the ancient metal, the universe seemed to explode into light and music and possibilities that his young mind had never imagined could exist. The bonding process was unlike anything anyone on the station had ever witnessed. The moment Marcus's fingers touched the ancient tag, both he and Ethan were surrounded by a cascade of shimmering energy that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The mathematical symbols on the tag began to glow with their own inner light, rearranging themselves in complex patterns that hurt to look at directly. Marcus felt his consciousness expand in ways that defied description. Suddenly he could perceive not just Ethan's thoughts and emotions, but also the underlying harmonic frequencies that connected all living things throughout the station. The fear and excitement of the watching crowd, the curiosity of his parents, even the complex data processes of Chief Administrator Zixathera's crystalline consciousness, all of it flowed through his awareness like a vast symphony of life. Through their new connection, Ethon shared the process that was occurring. The Nexus Guardian's biotechnological systems were analyzing Marcus at the deepest level, learning his genetic patterns, his neural pathways, his emotional responses, and his potential for growth. In return, Marcus was gaining access to abilities that had been dormant within Ethon for centuries, waiting for the right person to activate them. The energy readings are off the charts, one of the station technicians reported, his voice filled with awe rather than alarm. But they're not random. There's an incredibly complex pattern to them, like the station's entire power grid is being optimized. Indeed, throughout the Galactic Pet Exchange, systems that had been running inefficiently for years were suddenly operating at peak performance. Environmental controls that had never quite managed to maintain perfect atmospheric conditions for all the diverse species present were now maintaining optimal comfort levels for everyone. Translation devices that had struggled with certain dialectical nuances were suddenly providing flawless communication. Dr. Chen monitored her son's vital signs with her medical scanner, amazed to find that despite the dramatic nature of what was happening, Marcus appeared to be in perfect health. If anything, his brain activity was showing patterns of enhanced cognitive function that shouldn't have been possible. "How are you feeling?" she asked him as the energy cascade began to stabilize. Marcus opened his eyes, and for a moment they reflected the same iridescent quality as Ethon's scales. "I feel complete," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with everyone who heard them. "Like I've been missing half of myself my entire life and I didn't even know it." Ethan had undergone its own transformation during the bonding. The dragon's scales now shifted through a broader spectrum of colors, reflecting not just light but also emotional and mental states. Its size had increased slightly, and its movements carried a confidence and purpose that had been completely absent during its years of captivity. More remarkably, the ancient tag around its neck had changed completely. The mysterious symbols were gone, replaced by new markings that seemed to shift and update in real time. Dr. Chen's scanner revealed that the new symbols were displaying current information about both Marcus and Ethan's status, including biological data, emotional states, and what appeared to be mission parameters. "What kind of abilities do you have now?" Chief Administrator Zixthera asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her administrative concerns. Marcus looked to Ethan, and information flowed between them without the need for words. "We can sense the emotional and mental states of others, help facilitate communication between different species, and—" He paused, processing more complex data streams. "We can identify sources of conflict before they escalate, and suggest solutions that work for all parties involved." "A living diplomatic tool," Ambassador Chen murmured, understanding the profound implications of what his son had become. But Ethan wanted to demonstrate rather than simply describe their new capabilities. The dragon turned its attention to a commotion that had been building in another section of the station. Through their enhanced senses, Marcus could perceive a dangerous misunderstanding developing between a group of crystalline traders and some ammonia-breathing merchants from the outer rim. "There's going to be a fight," Marcus announced suddenly. "The crystalline beings think the merchants are trying to cheat them, but it's actually a translation error. The merchants' cultural concept of fair price doesn't translate properly into the crystalline economic system." Chief Administrator Zixthera immediately accessed her station monitoring systems. "How could you possibly know that?" "The incident you're describing is taking place 3 levels away from here." "We can sense it," Marcus replied simply, "and we can help fix it." What happened next would be talked about throughout the galactic trade networks for years to come. Marcus and Ethan, moving as one perfectly coordinated unit, made their way through the station to the site of the developing conflict. By the time they arrived, the situation had already escalated, to the point where both groups had called for their respective security forces. The crystalline beings were pulsing with angry red frequencies while the ammonia-breathing merchants had inflated their gas sacks in a threat display. Station security was trying to keep the groups separated, but the language barriers and cultural misunderstandings were making the situation worse by the minute. Marcus walked calmly into the center of the standoff, with Ethan at his side. The dragon began to emit a complex harmonic frequency that seemed to calm everyone present, while Marcus addressed both groups simultaneously. What amazed the watching security personnel was that Marcus wasn't using the station's translation systems. Instead, he was speaking to each group in their own language, using not just the words but also the cultural concepts and emotional undertones that conveyed his meaning perfectly. To the crystalline beings, he explained the mathematical basis of the merchant's pricing structure, showing how their concept of fair value was actually more generous than the standard crystalline economic models would suggest. To the merchants, he described the crystalline beings' harmonic frequency-based evaluation system, helping them understand that what they had interpreted as insults were actually expressions of genuine interest in forming a trade partnership. Within minutes, not only was the conflict resolved, but both groups were actively working together to establish a mutually beneficial trading arrangement that would benefit both their species for years to come. "How did you do that?" one of the security officers asked Marcus as the groups dispersed peacefully. "Ethan helped me understand how each group thinks and communicates," Marcus explained. "The architects designed the Nexus Guardians to be bridges between different forms of consciousness. We don't just translate languages. We translate entire ways of thinking." Word of the incident spread rapidly throughout the station, and soon Marcus and Ethan found themselves at the center of attention from traders, diplomats, and officials from dozens of different species. Everyone wanted to see the legendary Nexus Guardian in action, to witness the return of architect technology to the galaxy. But the most significant reaction came from Chief Administrator Zixthera herself. As they returned to the area where the bonding had taken place, she approached Marcus with a proposal that would change the course of his life. "Marcus Chen," she said formally, her crystalline surface reflecting the deep respect she felt. "On behalf of the Galactic Trade Council, I would like to offer you and Ethan positions as official diplomatic mediators. Your abilities could help resolve conflicts and misunderstandings that have been causing problems throughout our trading networks for decades." Marcus looked to his parents, then to Ethan, feeling the dragon's excitement and agreement flowing through their bond. "We would be honored to help," he replied. but we're still learning what we can do. We'll need time to understand our abilities fully. Of course, Zixthara agreed. Consider this an open invitation. When you're ready, the galaxy could use mediators like you. As the excitement of the day began to wind down, Marcus realized that his life had been fundamentally changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. He was no longer just a 12-year-old boy with diplomatic ambitions. He was half of a team that had the potential to help build understanding between species across the galaxy, and he couldn't wait to discover what they would accomplish together. 3 months after the bonding ceremony, Marcus and Ethan had settled into life aboard the diplomatic vessel New Horizons with remarkable ease. The ship's crew, initially skeptical about having a dragon aboard, had quickly come to appreciate Ethan's presence. The Guardian's ability to sense mechanical stress and system inefficiencies had helped prevent 3 potential engine failures, and its calming harmonic frequencies had resolved several crew conflicts before they could escalate. Marcus had grown too, not just in his understanding of his abilities but physically as well. The bond with Ethan seemed to be accelerating his development in subtle ways. His reflexes were faster, his memory more precise, and his ability to process complex information had increased dramatically. More importantly, his empathy had deepened to the point where he could sense the emotional states of every person on the ship. Their first real test as diplomatic mediators came when the New Horizons was diverted to the Kepler 442 system to help resolve a crisis that threatened to destabilize trade throughout the entire sector. 2 colony worlds, Thermos and Glacialis, had been locked in an escalating dispute over mineral rights that was rapidly approaching the point of armed conflict. The situation is more complex than our initial report suggested, Ambassador Chen explained to Marcus as they approached the system. Thermos is a volcanic world inhabited by silicon-based life forms who require high-temperature environments. Glacialis is an ice world populated by crystalline beings similar to Chief Administrator Zixthara. Both worlds contain deposits of rare tritanium crystals, but they're located in disputed asteroid fields between the 2 planets. Marcus studied the diplomatic files while Ethan curled around his chair, both of them processing the information simultaneously. Through their bond, Marcus could feel the dragon analyzing the geological data, the trade agreements, and the cultural backgrounds of both species. There's something missing from these reports, Marcus said finally. The conflict seems too intense for a simple dispute over mining rights. Ethan senses emotional resonances in the communication logs that suggest deeper issues. Dr. Chen looked up from her own research. What kind of emotional resonances? Fear, Marcus replied, his expression troubled. Both species are afraid of something, but it's not each other. The mining dispute is just a symptom of a larger problem. When the New Horizons arrived at the neutral meeting station that had been established between the 2 worlds, Marcus and Ethan immediately sensed the tension crackling through the facility. Representatives from both species were present, but they were maintaining strict separation and refusing to engage in direct communication. The Thermos delegates were tall, angular beings whose bodies appeared to be made of flowing lava, contained within crystalline shells. They radiated heat even in the climate-controlled environment of the station, and their movements were precise and economical. The Glacialis representatives were smaller, more compact crystalline beings whose surfaces reflected their emotional states through shifting patterns of light and color. Honored mediators, said Ambassador Helix from the Galactic Diplomatic Corps, we are grateful for your assistance. Traditional mediation techniques have been unsuccessful. Both species refuse to negotiate in good faith and we're concerned that military forces may soon be deployed. Marcus nodded politely, but his attention was focused on the emotional atmosphere in the room. Through his bond with Ethan, he could sense layers of fear, anger, and desperation that went far beyond a simple territorial dispute. Before we begin formal mediation, Marcus said, may we speak with representatives from each species privately? Sometimes individual conversations can reveal concerns that aren't apparent in group settings. The first meeting was with Thermal Core 7, the lead delegate from Thermos. The silicon-based being sat across from Marcus and Ethan in a specially heated conference room, its internal temperatures causing the air to shimmer around its form. Young mediator, Thermal Core 7 said, its voice like controlled volcanic eruption. Your reputation precedes you. We have heard of your success in resolving the trader conflicts at the pet exchange. But this situation is different. More serious. We understand, Marcus replied, noting how Ethan's scales were shifting to match the harmonic frequencies that the thermos delegate was unconsciously emitting. Can you help us understand what makes this situation so different? For a long moment, Thermal Core 7 remained silent, its internal light fluctuating with what Marcus recognized as internal conflict. Finally, the being spoke. The tritanium crystals are not just valuable minerals to us. They are the only substance we have discovered that can contain and focus the thermal energy that our species requires for reproduction. Without access to sufficient tritanium, we face extinction within 3 generations. Marcus felt a jolt of understanding flow through his bond with Ethan. You're not fighting over wealth. You're fighting for survival. Correct, Thermal Core 7 confirmed, its form brightening with relief at being understood. But we cannot reveal this to the Glacialis delegation. They would use our desperation against us, demand impossibly high prices or complete control of the mining rights. The meeting with Crystal Song Harmony, the Glacialis representative, revealed an equally crucial perspective. The crystalline being sat in a specially cooled chamber, its surface cycling through patterns of blue and silver light that Marcus was beginning to recognize as signs of deep distress. The tritanium crystals are not mere minerals to our kind, Crystal Song Harmony explained, its voice resonating with harmonic frequencies that made the entire room vibrate gently. They are the foundation of our memory storage systems. Each crystal can hold thousands of years of our collective history and knowledge. The disputed fields contain crystals of unprecedented purity and size. Marcus leaned forward, beginning to see the scope of the real problem. Your species stores its cultural heritage in tritanium crystals. More than that, the Glacialis delegate continued, its light patterns shifting to deeper blues. Our greatest fear is that if we lose access to these crystal fields, future generations will have no way to preserve their memories and knowledge. We would face a form of cultural extinction, becoming a species without history or wisdom. After the private meetings, Marcus and Ethan sat together in their quarters, processing what they had learned. Both species needed the tritanium crystals for fundamental aspects of their existence, but neither could afford to reveal their vulnerability to the other. Traditional mediation would try to find a compromise that gives each side some of what they want, Marcus said to Ethan. But this isn't about wanting, it's about needing. Both species believe they're facing extinction. Ethan's response flowed through their bond, images and concepts that suggested a different approach entirely. Instead of dividing the resources, what if they could find a way for both species to use the tritanium crystals without depleting them? Marcus sat up straighter as the possibilities unfolded in his mind. You're right. We're not just mediators. We're problem solvers, and the architects designed you to think beyond conventional limitations. Working through the night, Marcus and Ethan developed a proposal that would have been impossible without their unique combination of human creativity and architect technology. When they presented their solution at the joint session the next day, the reaction from both delegations was immediate and dramatic. What if, Marcus began, standing before both groups with Ethan at his side, instead of fighting over who gets to mine the tritanium crystals, we work together to unlock their full potential? He activated a holographic display showing the crystal formations in the disputed asteroid fields. Our analysis suggests that the crystals can serve both purposes simultaneously. The thermos delegates need tritanium to focus thermal energy for reproduction. The Glacialis representatives need it to store cultural memory. But these aren't competing uses, they're complementary ones. Ethan contributed its own harmonic analysis, demonstrating how the thermal energy patterns that the thermos species used for reproduction could actually enhance the memory storage capacity of the crystals when properly channeled. We propose a joint colony, Marcus continued, where both species work together to develop new applications for tritanium that benefit everyone. The thermos thermal generation techniques could increase crystal storage capacity exponentially, while Glacialis memory preservation methods could extend the useful lifespan of thermal focusing systems indefinitely. The silence that followed was profound. Both delegations were processing implications that neither had considered before. Through his enhanced senses, Marcus could feel their surprise giving way to excitement as they realized the potential of what he was proposing. It would take weeks of detailed negotiations to work out the specifics, but in that moment, Marcus knew they had transformed a conflict that threatened two civilizations into an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. And he was just beginning to understand what he and Ethan might accomplish together. 6 months later, the joint colony of Harmonia had become a model of interspecies cooperation that was being studied and replicated throughout the galaxy. The partnership between Thermus and Glacialis had exceeded every expectation, with tritanium crystal applications developing at an unprecedented pace. More importantly for Marcus and Ethan, their success had attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic government. They were aboard the massive space station Concordia Prime, the seat of the Galactic Council, where Marcus had been invited to address the full assembly about the potential for expanding the Nexus Guardian program. At 13 years old, he would be the youngest being ever to speak before the council. But his nervousness was balanced by Ethan's steady presence and the confidence that came from their successful mediations. The implications of what you've accomplished go far beyond conflict resolution, Councillor Vexnar said as she briefed Marcus before his presentation. The elderly Zephyrian's skin had faded to a distinguished silver with age, but her mental acuity remained razor-sharp. If we can locate and activate other Nexus Guardians, we might be able to address systemic problems that have plagued interspecies relations for millennia. Marcus nodded, reviewing his presentation notes one final time. Ethan has been sharing more of the architect historical records with me. There were originally thousands of Nexus Guardians created, each designed to bond with specific types of individuals based on their psychological profiles and intended roles in society. What happened to them? Dr. Chen asked. She and Ambassador Chen had accompanied Marcus to Concordia Prime, serving as both family support and diplomatic advisors. Most were scattered when the architect civilization fell, Marcus explained, his expression growing sad as he processed the historical data flowing from Ethan. Many ended up in places like the Pet Exchange, misunderstood and waiting for centuries for someone who could read their tags. Others were lost entirely. Some may have been destroyed by people who didn't understand what they were. Ethan's sadness at the fate of its fellow guardians flowed through their bond, tinged with hope that Marcus's presentation might help locate and rescue the survivors. When the time came for Marcus to address the Galactic Council, he walked into the massive chamber with Ethan at his side, feeling the weight of thousands of years of interspecies conflict and cooperation watching him. Representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy filled the tiered seating areas, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. Honored counselors, Marcus began, his young voice carrying clearly through the advanced acoustics of the chamber. I stand before you today not just as a human, but as half of a partnership that represents the lost wisdom of the architects. Through my bond with Ethan, I have learned that the ancient civilization that created the Nexus Guardians faced the same challenges that we face today. How to help different forms of consciousness understand each other, how to resolve conflicts before they escalate to violence, and how to build genuine cooperation between species with vastly different needs and perspectives. He gestured to Ethan, whose scales were cycling through patterns that seemed to harmonize with the emotional rhythms of the assembled representatives. The architect's solution was not to impose uniformity or to suppress differences. Instead, they created bridges, living connections that could help different forms of consciousness translate not just languages, but entire ways of thinking and being. Marcus activated a holographic display showing the locations throughout the galaxy where dormant Nexus Guardians had been detected through network analysis and historical records. We believe that dozens of inactive Guardians still exist, waiting in pet shops, private collections, research facilities, and forgotten storage areas throughout known space. Each one represents centuries of accumulated wisdom and the potential for forming partnerships that could transform diplomacy, scientific cooperation, and cultural exchange. The response from the Council was immediate and enthusiastic. Representatives began discussing implementation strategies, funding mechanisms, and the creation of specialized teams to locate and properly activate dormant Guardians, but the most significant response came from an unexpected source. Young, mediator, a voice said from the gallery reserved for observers. May I address the council? Marcus turned to see a figure that made both him and Ethan gasp with amazement. The being was tall and elegant, with features that seemed to shift between different alien physiologies as if they couldn't quite maintain a stable form. But what truly took their breath away was the dragon-like creature beside them. Clearly another Nexus Guardian, but one that was fully active and confident in ways that suggested a much older and more developed bond. "I am Keth Vara of the Archive Worlds," the figure continued as they approached the speaker's platform. "And this is my partner Zephyros. We have been watching the young human's progress with great interest, as we represent the last active architect research facility in this galaxy." The council chamber erupted in excited discussions as the implications of this revelation sank in. Marcus stared at the newcomers, feeling through his bond with Ethon a sense of recognition and joy that almost overwhelmed him. "Ethon recognizes Zephyros," Marcus said wonderingly. "They were created in the same generation. But how is that possible? The architect civilization fell thousands of years ago." Kethavara smiled, an expression that somehow worked across their shifting physiological forms. "The fall of the architect civilization was not as complete as galactic historians believe. A small number of us survived by withdrawing to hidden worlds and continuing our research in secret. We have been waiting for signs that the galaxy was ready to rediscover architect technology responsibly." Zephyros approached Ethan, and the two guardians touched foreheads in a greeting that sent harmonic frequencies rippling through the council chamber. Marcus felt his own connection to Ethan deepening as new information flowed through the Guardian network. Technical specifications, historical records, and most importantly, training protocols for developing his abilities further. The partnership between Marcus and Ethan represents the beginning of a new era, Kethavara announced to the assembled council. But it is only the beginning. With proper guidance and support, the Nexus Guardian program could be expanded to create a network of mediators capable of addressing conflicts and challenges on a galactic scale. Councillor Vexnar stood, her skin shifting to the formal purple that indicated a proposal of major significance. "The Council recognizes the profound implications of today's revelations. I hereby propose the establishment of the Galactic Mediation Corps, with Marcus Chen and Ethon serving as founding members in the Archive Worlds, providing technical consultation." The vote was unanimous. As the council session concluded and representatives began the complex process of implementing the new mediation program, Marcus found himself in quiet conversation with Kethvara and Zephyros. Through their connection to the Guardian network, Ethon was downloading thousands of years of accumulated knowledge and experience. "This is just the beginning," Kethvara said to Marcus. "Your partnership with Ethan has the potential to grow far beyond what either of you currently understand. The architects designed the Guardians to evolve and develop new capabilities based on the needs and growth of their bonded partners." Marcus looked at Ethan, whose scales were now displaying patterns of unprecedented complexity, as new abilities activated throughout its biotechnological systems. "What kind of capabilities?" "That depends on who you become and what challenges you face together," Kethavara replied. The architects believed that the universe itself would guide the development of each partnership toward its highest potential. As they left Concordia Prime to begin their new role as founders of the Galactic Mediation Corps, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that day in the pet exchange, when he had chosen to read an ancient tag around a lonely dragon's neck. He had set out to find a pet, and had instead discovered a partner who would help him change the galaxy. But he had a feeling that their greatest adventures were still ahead of them. 5 years had passed since Marcus first touched the ancient tag around Ethan's neck, and their partnership had become legendary throughout the galaxy. At 18, Marcus had mediated conflicts between dozens of species, helped establish 3 new interspecies colonies, and worked with the Archive Worlds to locate and activate 47 dormant Nexus Guardians. The Galactic Mediation Corps now numbered over 50 active partnerships, each one unique in their abilities and approaches to conflict resolution. But their greatest challenge was yet to come. The emergency call came while Marcus and Ethan were working at the Corps headquarters on Concordia Prime, training newly bonded mediator teams. The message was from the frontier regions, where human expansion into previously unexplored space had led to an unprecedented crisis. "Marcus," Admiral Sarah Torres said via hologram, her normally composed demeanor showing signs of extreme stress. We need you and Ethan at the Proxima Terminus immediately. First contact with a new species has gone catastrophically wrong, and we're on the verge of the first interstellar war involving humanity since we joined the galactic community. Marcus felt Ethan's concern flowing through their bond as they processed the implications. Humanity had been incredibly fortunate in their integration into galactic society, largely due to their natural diplomatic abilities and the mediation work that Marcus and others had pioneered. A war involving humans could destabilize the entire political structure that had maintained peace for decades. What happened? Marcus asked, already mentally preparing for immediate departure. Human colonists in the Kepler 442b system encountered a species we're calling the Collective. They appear to be a hive mind civilization, but unlike any we've encountered before. Initial contact attempts resulted in what the Collective interpreted as an attack on their fundamental consciousness. They've surrounded the human colony with a massive fleet and are demanding either complete surrender or the withdrawal of all human presence from their expanded territory. The situation was even worse than Admiral Torres had indicated. Marcus realized as he and Ethan arrived at the crisis zone aboard the diplomatic vessel, Horizon's End. The Collective's ships were unlike anything in the galactic databases. Vast, organic-looking structures that seemed to pulse with unified purpose. Their technology appeared to be biological rather than mechanical, and their communication methods were completely incompatible with standard translation systems. More troubling still, the human colonists on Kepler 442b were trapped on the surface, unable to evacuate due to the Collective's blockade. Attempts at communication had only made the situation worse, with each failed contact leading to increased aggression from the alien fleet. The problem is fundamental, Dr. Chen explained to Marcus as they reviewed the contact logs. Human consciousness is individual-based. We think as separate beings who cooperate. The Collective appears to think as a unified entity with billions of component parts. When our colonists tried to establish contact using standard individual-to-individual protocols, the Collective interpreted it as an attempt to fragment their consciousness. Marcus studied the communication attempts, feeling Ethan's analytical processes working in parallel with his own. They're not just offended by our communication methods. They're terrified that we're trying to destroy their most fundamental aspect of existence. Exactly, Admiral Torres confirmed. And now they believe that all individual-based consciousness is a threat to unified consciousness everywhere. They're not just demanding that humans leave their territory. They're demanding that we cease to exist as individuals entirely. Through his bond with Ethan, Marcus could sense the dragon's excitement as it processed the challenge. This was exactly the kind of problem that Nexus Guardians had been created to solve, bridging the gap between fundamentally different forms of consciousness. We need to approach this differently, Marcus announced to the crisis team. A traditional diplomacy assumes that both sides share basic concepts about consciousness and communication. But the Collective doesn't just think differently from us. They think in a completely different framework. What are you proposing? Admiral Torres asked. Ethan and I are going to attempt direct consciousness contact with the Collective, Marcus replied, feeling the dragon's confidence flowing through their bond. Not individual-to-individual communication, but individual-to-collective. We'll try to establish a bridge that allows both forms of consciousness to coexist and communicate safely. The attempt would be dangerous. No one knew what effect contact with a hive-mind consciousness might have on Marcus's individual awareness, or whether Ethan's biotechnological systems could handle the processing load of interfacing with millions of connected minds simultaneously. But, as they approached the lead Collective vessel in a small diplomatic shuttle, Marcus felt calmer than he had in years. This was what he and Ethan had been building toward throughout all their training and experience. The chance to solve a problem that threatened not just human expansion, but the fundamental coexistence of different forms of consciousness. Are you ready for this? Marcus asked Ethan as they prepared for contact. The dragon's response was filled with anticipation and determination. Through their bond, Marcus could feel Ethan accessing architect protocols that had been dormant for millennia, systems designed specifically for contact with collective consciousness entities. The first moment of contact was overwhelming. Marcus felt his individual awareness suddenly connected to a vast network of minds that thought and felt as one unified entity. The sensation was terrifying and beautiful simultaneously, like being a single note that suddenly became part of an infinite symphony. But instead of being absorbed into the collective, Marcus found that his bond with Ethan allowed him to maintain his individual identity while still participating in the collective experience. Through Ethan's biological translation systems, he could communicate his thoughts to the collective in ways that they could understand without feeling threatened. "We do not seek to fragment your consciousness," Marcus projected to the collective, his thoughts carrying harmonic frequencies that Ethan generated to make his meaning clear. "We seek to understand how individual consciousness and collective consciousness can coexist without threatening each other." The response from the collective was immediate and intense. Marcus felt their fear, their confusion, and their desperate desire to protect their unified existence. But he also sensed something else: curiosity about how individual consciousness worked and whether it might offer perspectives that collective consciousness couldn't achieve. Through Ethan, Marcus was able to share memories and experiences that showed how individual humans cooperated and built communities without losing their separate identities. In return, the collective shared their own experiences of unity, cooperation, and the profound sense of belonging that came from consciousness shared across millions of individuals. For the first time in galactic history, two fundamentally different forms of consciousness were able to truly understand each other. The negotiations that followed established principles that would govern interactions between individual and collective consciousness species for generations to come. The human colony on Kepler 442b became a joint research facility where scientists from both civilizations worked together to study consciousness itself, leading to breakthroughs that enhanced the quality of life for billions of beings throughout the galaxy. But perhaps more importantly, Marcus and Ethan's success opened up vast regions of space that had been avoided due to the presence of collective consciousness species. The galaxy suddenly became larger and more diverse, with new opportunities for cooperation and exploration that had never before been possible. Years later, as Marcus reflected on his journey from a shy 12-year-old boy to one of the galaxy's most successful mediators, he realized that his greatest achievement hadn't been solving any particular conflict. It had been proving that understanding between any form of consciousness was possible, as long as there was willingness to bridge the gaps that seemed insurmountable. Standing on the observation deck of the Corps headquarters with Ethan beside him, watching ships from dozens of species travel peacefully through space that had once been filled with conflict, Marcus smiled at how far they had come from that lonely pet exchange, where no one had wanted the shy dragon with the ancient tag around its neck. "Ready for the next challenge?" he asked Ethan, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, new forms of consciousness were waiting to be discovered and understood. The dragon's response flowed through their bond with the warm confidence of a partnership that had already changed the universe and was ready to change it again. Always. Together, they had proven that the greatest adventures began not with conflict or conquest, but with the simple decision to understand someone who seemed impossibly different. And in a galaxy filled with infinite diversity, that was the most human thing of all.